Let's kind of touch on mental health, if that feels good.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of people are very anxious because there's a lot of fear narrative out in the world. And then that can lead to not sleeping, and it can ripple out in so many different ways. So for women, I don't know if it's different between women and men on how they would support themselves that are struggling mentally with anxiety or depression, as well as insomnia and not being able to sleep.
Yeah. Well, for everybody, I'd say like the top three sleep supplements that are very safe to try are usually, and I have had people add them one at a time, but it's usually magnesium, then glycine, and then inositol. A lot of people think of melatonin, they'll think of like kava or lemon balm or passion flower or other herbs to relax. Sometimes ashwagandha is a very good one. Magnolia can be really good. Rhodiola can be helpful for some people with sleep, but rhodiola can also give people a little more energy. But there's things that calm, GABA, and relax the nervous system. But I'd say magnesium, inositol, and what was the other one I said? Magnesium, inositol, and glycine are usually the best for helping sleep. Then when you get into women over 45 or getting into the perimenopausal ages, that's a whole different beast. So most commonly sleep problems are due to poor sleep hygiene for 95% of people, which typically means they're having alcohol or caffeine, which stick in your body for 48 hours. Most people don't want to hear that. But if you're having caffeine, it's going to affect you for 2 days, not just 12 hours or not just 6 hours. So if you're having caffeine, even in the morning, it could be affecting your sleep at night. So that could be playing a role. You might need to do a little caffeine or alcohol detox. But I find for a lot of people, it's sleep hygiene, too much screen time at bed, too much stress before bed, too much scrolling of scary news feeds before bed, or just being more mindful about the sleep routine. Falling asleep around the same time every day is helpful. Having a fairly routine food and sleep schedule is very crucial. But when women do get into the more menopause or close to menopause years, that's typically a whole different beast where you need to support their hormonal system, whether it's their adrenal, their thyroid, or their sex hormones, through things like more hormonal replacement therapy for some people, where it is when they're really depleted, they might actually need some natural or synthetic estrogen or progesterone or pregnenolone or DHEA. They can go to a doctor to get tested to see if they need that, get their levels checked, and then take that. That can be really helpful, but it is the strongest thing you could probably use with the most potential negative consequences as well. So I don't use that as a first line of defense. But if someone's like really struggling, sometimes we'll just give them some creams or natural hormone replacement to get them over a hump, and they can get into the habit of feeling like they're able to sleep, especially if they have sleep anxiety, which is very common. When you can't sleep, people then become stressed about sleeping, which is almost harder to correct than everything else. It makes it just like this weird catch-22. Like it's hard to sleep because you're stressed about sleep, but you can't sleep because you're stressed about stressing about sleep. And it's a big cycle. So sometimes that can get people out of the cycle, or supplementing with some of the herbs I mentioned, or glycine, magnesium, and inositol can also be really helpful for people. But in the menopausal years, it's not your fault that you get to 45 or 55 and it's tougher to sleep, or you wake up at the drop of a hat. It's not because you're necessarily like worrying about your children or you're more stressed. But your brain and your body does get more sensitive in those years to inflammation, to alcohol, to caffeine. Your liver gets more sensitive. Your body does dry out from less estrogen, which is why a lot of the dryness happens, or thinning of the skin happens. That's because of less estrogen and less hormonal support through menopause. So it's not your fault that those things are happening. But if you lived in a healthier society and culture where we didn't have unclean tap water, we weren't slightly toxic or inflamed, or we had less stress in our lives, or less phones, or less white noise, or less EMFs, or less other things, then our hormonal systems would be a lot healthier. That's why Eastern Asian countries generally didn't really have menopausal symptoms until they started becoming Americanized or Westernized. Their food quality went down. They had less fermented soy, healthy fermented soy, which is a natural iso flavonoid. It's similar to estrogen, like a pseudoestrogen. They had less of that. And so a lot of them then started increasing their menopausal symptoms. So I'm not actually anti-soy. Soy can actually help through menopause.
Okay.
If it is an organic, non-GMO, clean source that's fermented like miso soup or natto or tempeh or things like that. I don't think we need to be having tons and tons of soy for most people, but through menopause is actually the prime time for the average person to have more miso soup or have more natto or tempeh.